Welcome to our first video in our module on the Bible, the greatest story ever told. Before you is our reading schedule. There will be 4 in-person sessions, and the chapters are divided up as equally as possible for these 4 sessions. 14 chapters with a prologue and epilogue with the page numbers, for a total of 16 videos. There is a lot of content and material in this module. There's lots to talk about for the Bible. Before you are the resources that went into the preparation of this module. Prologue. This is our story. Everyone loves a good story. How often do we talk about generation-defining stories, such as Jack Kerouac's 1957's On the Road, Ernest Hemingway's 1926 The Sun Also Rises, F. Scott Fitzgerald's 1920s This Side of Paradise, J.R.R. Tolkien's late 1940s The Lord of the Rings, Robert A. Heinlein's 1961 Stranger in a Strange Land, C.S. Lewis's 1950s The Chronicles of Narnia, and J.K. Rowling's 1990s Harry Potter series. Each of these examples of literature has spoken to some important aspect of a particular generation, which left a lasting influence on them, resonating with the spirit of the age. Notice how special it is for our parents or grandparents to tell us stories about our family tree, entrusting us with the stories about our ancestors. You begin to feel like you are now included into this story, as if it's still being written and you are the next chapter. Boy, doesn't that feel like a rite of passage. You are a chapter in a larger story, and it is now your turn to add something unique to it. Growing up, I didn't know the story of the McGregors beyond my own household. Luckily, we had an amateur genealogist in the family who took it upon herself to keep the stories of the McGregors alive for future generations. Until I learned about the famous members in my family, my inspiration was limited to actor Ewan McGregor and lightweight wrestler Conor McGregor. But then I learned about Rob Roy, whose adventures have been immortalized by Sir Walter Scott's 1817 Rob Roy, then later a 1922 silent film, a 1953 Disney movie, and a 1995 film starring Liam Neeson as the title character. Add to that a William Wordsworth poem, a Hector Berlioz overture, and an operetta, all based on Rob Roy's life and times. And suddenly, I was a prouder McGregor. Clan MacGregor is a Highland Scottish clan that claims an origin in the early 800s, with an ancient Gaelic motto that reminds all that we are descendants of Scottish royalty. McGregors were known for many things, good and bad, including being among the first families of Scotland to begin playing the bagpipes. Is it any wonder now that I decided to take bagpipe lessons in high school? When we return home from work in the evening, sit around the dining room table, or curl up in bed for the night, we are prepared to ask about our day. We are not satisfied with a bullet point list of facts. We share our day in stories. When someone asks us to describe some aspect of ourselves, we are not pleased just to give a catalog of fun facts. We tell about ourselves in stories. This is how humans have communicated with each other since the beginning of time, by telling stories. When you tell a story, you spark a connection. Stories were being told well before written language was developed. Everyday events became stories to tell children. We are drawn to stories because we see ourselves reflected in them. And without thinking, we begin to interpret the meaning in stories in order to understand ourselves better. It is human nature. Our very identity, who we are, to whom we belong, our giftedness, our passions, our proclivities, our likes and dislikes, our strengths and weaknesses are formed by the stories we tell and the stories told to us since birth. These stories form the foundation for how we think about the world and live our lives. These stories preserve culture for us and pass on cultural knowledge from one generation to another. Stories keep cultures alive, and we are proud to be a part of that process of passing down our collective stories. One of the joys of having grandchildren is the stories. You've passed on to your children now being passed on to their children. Let me say that again. One of the joys of having grandchildren is the stories you've passed on to your children who are now being passed on to their children. Now you can sit back and enjoy the growing story. Stories provide a timeless link to ancient traditions and legends, but they also seek to describe to us universal truths about ourselves and our world. By storytelling, we share passions, fears, sadness, hardships, and joys, and we find common ground with other people so that we can connect and communicate with them. Stories transcend generations. It is through stories that we experience rich emotions and feelings of joy, sorrow, hardships, and failures. We learn about behaviors and consequences, and thus learn to engage with others in spite of our differences, as we come to understand where we each stand in this world. Stories inspire our imaginations, making them real. Stories help us create our identities as we tell stories of how we think, what we feel, and how we justify our decisions. There are many lessons to be learned from stories, right? Our brain is hardwired to communicate through stories. In that way, we learn what is right and what is wrong by sharing with each other our lived experiences. We tend to remember and process information better when we hear or read a story. The facts and data can only imprint themselves in our psyche through the use of storytelling. This is how humans have discovered the best way to pass on knowledge and concepts and thoughts and ideas. We embrace information because we tend to remember the emotions attached with them in a story. When a story moves us, we are motivated to take action or take steps to make a change in our lives or in the life of the world. And everyone has a story to tell, period. You have yours. In fact, you cannot escape or you cannot separate yourself from your story. You are a collection of experiences when you have formed. You are a collection of experiences that has formed you into one great story, unique only to you. You shape the meaning of your stories, and as you share these experiences with others, you come to realize that you have much in common with others, and you begin to appreciate all that makes you distinctive. Our personal narrative helps to explain everything in our life, from science to relationships, from feelings to memoirs, from questions to objections. Stories shape our perceptions of the world, and our perception of the world shapes the stories you tell. Have you noticed how you are drawn to someone when they tell their story? Or how people around you are attentive when you share a story about your own life? Stories stop us dead in our tracks. We pay attention. Our minds pause and open up to other people and how they think and feel. Presenting financial facts and figures can bore most people, but just about any room of people will snap to attention when a story is told well. Now you begin stepping out of your reality and placing yourself in someone else's shoes, and you get to experience their perspective and engage in their emotions and actions and decisions. When you listen to someone else's story, it is as if you are living their story with them for just a brief moment. Then you come to a deeper appreciation for them. Stories help you learn to empathize with other people as you come to understand their point of view. The deep-seated prejudices and biases we harbor within us are pretty much firmly set in place, unless we are confronted and inspired by the stories of others. Very few people shift their opinions about ethical or moral issues in society without first listening to narratives that are not their own. For instance, very few people move from homophobia to full acceptance of LGBTQ persons without experiencing the story of those in the LGBTQ community. Bluntly put, exposure to other races and cultures and lifestyles and perspectives gives our story better integrity and depth. Our story, though unique to us, is still unfinished without the help of other people's stories. Without the mixing of stories from person to person, we simply have a flat, shapeless tale to tell. A story lacking truthfulness, life, and gravitas. Without others, our story is just assumptions and opinions without any roots. Ubuntu is a Zulu term from the Nguni, the Nguni Bantu of South Sahara Africa. It is often translated, "I am because we are." Though it is very difficult to define, a basic definition of Ubuntu has been the belief in a universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity. Ubuntu asserts that community, not an individual being, makes us human. A person is a person through other people. This suggests that humanity is not fully embedded or fully formed within any single person, but exists only between all humans together. Full humanity is a quality we owe to each other and share with each other. We help create each other and sustain each other. We belong to each other and participate in their creations. I am because you are. In other words, we are but a chapter in a larger story, and we need our chapters to come together. As technology continues to advance to bring us new and more information, humans will continue to crave stories more than ever in order to make sense of a complex and changing world. Today, more than ever, valuable stories are critical for us because without them, we lose perspective on what really matters in life. The world's major religions pass down eternal truths through the use of stories. The most influential religious books of all time are most often just filled with stories. The Holy Bible is not just a book, it is a library of books. Some people see the book as an outdated book of primitive, barbaric fairy tales that we have moved beyond, and so they ignore it, missing all the progressive and enlightened ideas that first entered human history through the writers of the Bible. Ideas and ideals we still fall short of. Ideas and ideals that are still way ahead of our present time. And then there are the folks who talk about how important and central and inspired the Bible is, but then butcher it with their stilted literalism and stifling interpretations, assuming that it says one thing, and if you just get that one thing, then you've read it well. The Bible is not a Christian handbook. It is not really a library for just a certain group of people. It does not belong to Christians or even Jews alone. It is not to divide us from them. The Bible is a library about what it means to be human, so it is for everyone. We are all human. The Bible is a library of books dealing with loss and anger and transcendence and worry and empire and money and fear and stress and joy and sex and doubt and grace and healing, and who doesn't want to talk about those? The Bible is filled with people wrestling and struggling and doubting and shouting and arguing with this idea that there is even a God, let alone some sort of divine being who is on our side. If you have a hard time swallowing the God talk you've heard over the years, well, great. The Bible is for you, because these are exactly the kind of things the writers of the Bible are dealing with in their writings. And the Bible is all over the place, due to the way it was sewn together into its final form. It goes from topic to topic, story to story, theme to theme, moving from poetry to history to parable to questions and rants. But there's still an arc to the Bible, one grand story that transcends each individual story that ties the entire thing together. It is still arranged with some intentionality, but there will be moments you are reading through the Bible when you find yourself thinking, where did that come from? What does this have to do with XYZ? Talk to anyone who has been reading and studying and exploring the Bible over many years, and you will find that the more you sit and struggle and wrestle and hug it, and wet the pages with your tears, and throw the Bible in fury and passion across the room, the more compelling and mysterious and interesting and dangerous and convicting and helpful and strange and personal and inspiring and divine and enjoyable the Bible becomes. Why is this so? This divine library is one story. The story of God, the story of God's people, the story of humanity and divinity, the story of history and eternity, the story of the will of God, the greatest story ever told. And it is a story that involves everyone, in all times and in all places. Getting caught up in superficial arguments about the historicity or the historical authenticity and accuracy of the stories of the Bible misses the point. We simply cannot prove with indisputable evidence that every verse is historically accurate and truthful in a way that would satisfy the modern scientific mind. We simply do not always have enough data. We do not possess a single original copy of any part of the Bible. We rarely know the details of many of the authors. We still struggle to understand a culture that once existed thousands of years ago on the opposite side of the world. Simply put, a fairy tale teaches truth without having to be true. This is not to say that the Bible is only a fairy tale, nor that the Bible is lying to us, nor unreliable, nor irrelevant. We would never say that the fable of Hansel and Gretel lies to us. We simply admit and trust that it teaches us valuable lessons. In fact, the Bible cannot be described by any single literary style. It is not all historical reporting, not all poems, not all codes and laws, not all correspondences between individuals. It is, though, a magnificent and messy mixture of it all. It can only be described as a library that tells not of just some stories, but the story. Certainly the Bible includes elements of legend, myth, folklore, fairy tale, and fable, but pinpointing where actuality ends and imagination begins is almost a fruitless task for us. But do not despair. It cannot be any other way. It is a story about us, and a story about us moving beyond ourselves to something greater. The Holy Bible remains the perfect combination of styles and genres in order to be what it was always meant to be: transformative. To approach the Bible with faith does not mean we must suspend our logic and force ourselves to accept that the Bible's every word is true. To approach the Bible with faith is to believe that it is authentically true, not necessarily always true. It teaches and preaches unarguable truths in whatever way it can. In those moments we feel that the Bible is giving us a tall tale, it is only because the story is striving to reach into the deepest regions of our imagination for the sake of transforming our spirits. So what makes the Bible miraculous is not in some belief that one person wrote it, whether human or divine, that it fell out of the heavens, or that it was written by the very finger of God or dictated straight from the mouth of God. If that were true, we could never fully identify with the Bible's story. It would be so removed from human experience. The pure fact that the Bible dives unapologetically into the nastiest moments of human history and unashamedly confronts the dirtiest of human behavior with all of its struggles and joys makes it out to be one of the greatest products of humankind, and yet one so intensely inspired by the divine. So what makes the Bible special? Well, the story itself, of course, but also that it came into existence and sustained for so long by a community of people. It is the story of a family passed on by that same family. In one sense, it is the grand story of Adam and Eve, or all of humanity, but it is also the specific family story of Abraham and Sarah and their descendants. Just as I felt connected to the ancient clan McGregor as I learned about my family's heritage, so we can feel connected to the long line of clan Yahweh, or clan God. Whenever you seek greater solidarity with humankind, or you seek deeper unity with the people called Christians, this is the library for you. As blind hymn writer Fanny Crosby wrote, "This is my story, this is my song." Perhaps we can adjust those words as Ubuntu people of faith. This is our story, this is our song.